And why does this matter? Because while not every person who is evicted falls into homelessness, eviction is a predictor of homelessness. And preventing it not only stabilizes families, but also strengthens our neighborhoods, helps our entire region, and most importantly, ensures that a person or their family doesn't have to experience the trauma of losing their home. This upstream work, investing in prevention rather than responding only after crisis, can transform how Houston approaches housing stability. And now that we've set the stage, I do want to take a moment to pause. If you've enjoyed the food this evening, I do want to share. It was provided by the PX Project, and they help young adults 18 to 24 after they graduate, providing them with culinary skills, learning front of house, back of house, do different explorations into career paths that they might be interested in, while kind of learning different skills. And so that's who catered this evening. And so if you have an event or anything like that, we do have materials back there if you're interested in kind of sharing and learning more. I want to now introduce our group of people who will be sharing their perspectives this evening. We'll start off this evening with James Gonzalez, who is our Vice President of Programs at CFTH. He will share some of the new eviction prevention work that we're launching. And then from there, we'll kick off our fireside chat, moderated by Kelly Young, CFTH's President and CEO. And then we'll welcome guests to the stage to join her. Guests will include Toy Babineau, Director of Community Resilience Program at Harris County Housing and Community Development, will discuss the county's investment in eviction prevention. Judge Steve Dubel, Harris County Justice of the Peace, Precinct 1, Place 2, will share what he's doing in his court to mitigate evictions. Donna Carney, Litigation Director at Lone Star Legal Aid, will provide insight into legal protections and early interventions for families facing eviction. And Mark Melton, Board Chair at the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, will talk about their recent expansion to Houston and how they're supporting households at risk. And before we get started, just on a quick note, the opinions expressed by our speakers tonight are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of CFTH's board, staff, or underwriters. And with that, I will hand the mic over to James to share about CFTH's eviction prevention work.
Hello. Hi. All right. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I'm laughing at my notes because our VP of Communications asked me what I would be saying tonight, wanted me to share my notes, and I said I was going to wing it, and she said that would not work, and sent me some things to talk about. So, as Katina mentioned, not everybody who's evicted ends up being homeless. We know many people will, if they cannot remedy the situation with their landlord, they might take what money they do have and try to relocate somewhere else, or they may stay with family and friends for a period of time until they're able to move out or find a more affordable situation. Historically, eviction prevention isn't something that the coalition has typically taken on as a project. We have done a lot of eviction prevention within our housing programs to keep our clients housed, but we've never actually operated an eviction prevention project. The reason why we haven't is because the funding is very limited. It typically has a lot of rules, and we already have a ton of wonderful providers who are experts in that work. You might be familiar with the assistance ministries in our area, so you got Memorial Assistance Ministries, Northwest Assistance Ministries, Umble Assistance Ministries, wham, bam, all that. You got so many of them. This past fall, we were given an opportunity by a private funder to try something new with eviction prevention. And we actually are collaborating with Endeavors, and there's a few folks back there from Endeavors who are here. So we wanted to try something new. One of the things about eviction is that once it's been filed, it's on your record, and that's it. A lot of the strings that come attached with the funds that are currently being operated with eviction prevention is it requires that eviction to be filed. And that's because the demand is so high, they want to prioritize those funds, and the feds also like to have a lot of rules with their dollars in general. But again, even if you can remedy the eviction, the eviction stays on your record. So it was important to us to take the opportunity with private dollars to try something different and work with landlords on the notice to vacate part of the process. Now, they have to give a notice to vacate before they file an eviction. That, we thought, was the ideal time to try something different. If we intervene at that point, perhaps we can keep the person in place and prevent them from having something on their record. The area that, now, the geography of Harris County is huge, so the area that we're going to focus on is actually within the JP court jurisdictions of courts 5 and 4. And we picked those two areas because they have the highest eviction rates in the county. So Endeavors is working with the landlords in that area to see if we can engage with them, advertise the program, work with them on that notice to vacate part of the process so that we can prevent evictions from being filed. We hope to serve at least 300 households. The program just started, so we are in baby steps. I wish I had more data and outcomes to share with you. So far, what we've heard from landlords is they are very interested in the process. Sometimes they don't want to file an eviction. They want to keep a tenant, and it's also very costly and time-consuming for them. So any way to make the process easier for a tenant to stay, we want to take advantage of that. I think the last thing that I'm going to mention is we're really hoping to compare data from 2026, so eviction data from this year to eviction data from last year, and look at those two JP court jurisdictions to see if we made any kind of impact at specific properties or decreased at all any of the filings in those areas. And that's about it. So, yeah, let's bring on the panel.
Let's do it. So you're going to keep this one.
You want me to keep it?
All right, panelists, come on up.
For someone who's on the bench.
We're going to have a Q&A. So if you don't mind holding it till then, that would be lovely. And y'all, you're going to have to fight for whatever chair and whoever's sitting right next to me, because I know that's the coveted one. I laugh because, like, you know, you're in a meeting and nobody will ever sit next to the boss, like this. So I'm always alone. So you're right.
Sure, you're more than welcome.
No, don't fall off. I just wanted to mention a couple things. First of all, I'm Kelly Young. I'm the president and CEO for the Coalition for the Homeless, and I really appreciate you all being here. We do video this, and the reason we video it is because we know not everybody can attend, and so we like to be able to put this up so people can get the information that they may need. So when we go through the presentation, the idea is to be able to illuminate as much information as possible from many different perspectives, and so just realize that's really the goal of this event, is to be able to do that so that if somebody watches it later on, that they are able then to gather the same information as if they had been here. So just a point of reference, and we will do Q&A. On the question and answer section, one of the things is that if there's really specific information that you're looking for, I would ask that you hold it until we finish and then find one of us after that to have that direct conversation. Partly because you might be talking for a friend or family member and they did not give permission. So we try to also be thoughtful to other people's experiences, and even though we try to help people, sometimes we're providing information that they did not actually ask to share. So we prefer to do that on an individual basis. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you each go from this side to that side, and what we're going to do is have you introduce yourself and then talk a little bit through the lens which you do this work around mitigating eviction.
Sure. Is this, y'all can hear me. My name is Donna Carney. I'm a litigation director at Lone Star Legal Aid. Lone Star Legal Aid is one of the largest nonprofit law firms in the country. We cover the entire eastern third of the state of Texas, but without a doubt, our most active office is here in Houston. We have been around collectively we were 2 organizations beforehand, but a total of, I'll say, 40-some years, a little over 40 years, that Lone Star Legal Aid has been advocating for impoverished Texans. And I'll say, at least since COVID, we've really prioritized, we've always handled evictions, we've always had cases against housing authorities and landlords and past landlords, a whole slew of cases, but I think that COVID really shed a spotlight on a problem that existed in Harris County. We were very happy to get involved in the trenches to start one of the very first Right to Counsel programs in Harris County. It was extremely successful, and yet what we see in our work is that the representation rates of tenants as reported through January advisors has always been very, very low. Less than 5% of tenants on a good day are represented by an attorney. The flip side to that is what happens either parallel to the eviction or just after the eviction, and we do handle a whole host of cases surrounding, kind of speaking to what Endeavor does. We are in the business, not for profit, of suing landlords and credit bureaus and tenant screening agencies to get those evictions off of people's reports, evictions that never should have been filed. And so I'm happy to talk more about it. I was given 2 microphones, which is not good for a lawyer, but I'll pass it on. Glad to speak with anybody after as well. Thank you.
Hi. Okay. Hi, I'm Toy Babineau, Director of Community Resilience Programs at Harris County Housing Development. And my lens is we fund the programs for all 16 JP courts. So we have attorneys in every JP court in Harris County, as well as we do emergency rental assistance. The COVID-19 definitely exacerbated the situation, and what we've noticed with the investment is that people just didn't know what their rights were. So they assumed that when they're evicted, this is the process, it's things that they've heard, not facts. So a lot of money was put into education also in allowing them to know what their rights are, and that showing up to court is really step one, because the no-show rate is actually really high also. So that's the lens from which I'm doing this work.
Hi, I'm Steve Duble. I'm the Justice of the Peace downtown in Preston. There's 16 JPs, as she mentioned. I became a JP in January of 23. And I want to start by making it clear that as a JP, I'm not here to prevent any landlord's right to an eviction. That's not what this is about. I think most good landlords and property managers would also like to prevent evictions. They'd rather not have them. But I view everything through an access to justice lens and providing resources. We have county facilities in all 16 of these courts, and we have an opportunity to meet people's needs and provide them with resources that are much needed, and try and help them through the process and try and keep them housed.
I'm Mark Melton. I come with no caveats or disclaimers. Just whatever it is I think is what you will hear. So I am not a nonprofit guy. I'm a tax lawyer at a big law firm in Dallas, where I lead the tax practice for one of the largest firms in the country. I got interested in this at the very beginning of COVID, kind of by accident, and that has led us down this path where we formed the Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center in 2021. And since then, we've helped about 50,000 people facing eviction in North Texas. It is true that historically, I think it's fewer than 1% of tenants across the United States have had lawyers when they were facing eviction. In Dallas County today, we represent about 85% of all the tenants that show up for their hearings in an eviction court in Dallas County. We have lawyers in every single court, every single day, standing at the ready to represent every single person that walks in the door. No exceptions, no eligibility, no means testing. We take all comers. So 4 months ago, we moved to Houston. Well, expanded. We're still in Dallas too. We are in the process of ramping up. We've already hired 8 people here. So we're trying to get our people in the courtrooms. I think we represented 156 people in full eviction trials just last month. And that number will only continue to go up as we continue to scale up. So I look forward to having this discussion.
So I think you can see we tried to bring different perspectives and different positions, because I think it's helpful. Because one of the things I think is most of us have no idea what happens in in an eviction. We have a lot of stories. We know some things. We might have a friend or a family member who went through it, but we don't necessarily know all of the steps. So if you all could briefly, from your perspective, just explain how an eviction process works.
Blink and it's done. It's fast, and the Texas legislature just changed the law, and so now it's even faster. I think the number one, overarching theme that I would want every Texan to know, most consumers don't know this, and tenants certainly don't know it, is that they do have some rights, very few rights. A tenant is entitled to receive a notice to vacate. There are certain ways that the notice is supposed to be delivered, although it's now a lot more expansive than it used to be. There's certain language that needs to go into a notice to vacate. I would hate for a tenant to receive something, smoke signal, and think, I need to vacate. And even then, the landlord is required to file a lawsuit. There is due process. There's an opportunity to be heard before most of our judges, and then there's a ruling, and then there's a writ. There's also an opportunity for an appeal. All of that takes place within less than a month. And so, and for many, it takes place in a couple of weeks. And so it is a very, very quick process. I don't want to speak for what the county is doing. I'll let Toy speak to that, but if a tenant doesn't have an attorney, they don't know what their rights are, by and large. Some tenants do. And so we like to think that tenants who are represented have a greater chance at actually being heard in court and having justice meted out. And then, of course, for all the collateral issues that tenants may have, there's further process that's available.
That's the voice microphone.
It won't stretch.
She has to go down like that, so.
I think the biggest thing for evictions is the minute you know that you don't have enough to make that rent payment is when you need to start reaching out for rental assistance or to see what's out there. The county is just one part of rental assistance, but there's a ton of other agencies that provide some form of assistance. So the earlier you reach out, the more time you have. People still need to vet your income and to get a check cut, so give yourself time, because a lot of times when you go to that docket with money, it's easier to sort out, or even just with a plan. But going to the docket with no plan, you haven't applied anywhere, it's really difficult to save housing. Another thing that the county is doing is that we realized that when you got the apartment back in 2023, you were working this amazing job, you're now laid off. So we are working to relocate you to somewhere that you can't afford. So that's another investment that we're making. We call that with barrier buster funds, where we can pay for your deposit and to help relocate you in those times. So the earlier, the better.
And I'll echo that. I know that I'll introduce Loretta Kovacic. Loretta is our eviction diversion facilitator, and her position was funded by a grant from the National Center for State Courts. And one of the things she does is, as soon as they get on the eviction docket, she reaches out to them by text. She does a physical text and introduces herself and tries to engage. I understand that the rent relief that the county puts out now, you don't even have to have an eviction pending. Is that right? Yes. So early really helps. So if we can get them to get their application in, and not all cases are good for rent relief applications, but if we think they're in that sweet spot where they just hit a bump on the road and they had reasonable rent, and they just need to get past this bump in the road, if we can get them in on an application before their date, it's a lot easier sell to the property manager when we say, hey, they've been doing turnarounds in about 2-3 weeks. If you're willing to wait it out, you can just sign this thing, extend your hearing date, and a lot of landlords are very amenable to that, especially with the quick turnaround, and we really appreciate that.
I mean, to me, an eviction looks like injustice. A lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times. I take a very pragmatic view of this. I was evicted once when I was 21 with 2 kids. I know what that feels like, and it was not good. In 2007, in the financial crisis, I was a landlord, and I lost 2 properties when my tenants got laid off. So I know what that feels like. One was significantly more traumatic than the other one, though, just so we're clear. The way that I view this is I'm not trying to solve the entire problem. I'm not trying to solve all of affordable housing. I'm not even trying to solve housing insecurity. I'm trying to solve one problem, and that is making sure that everyone has an advocate in that courtroom to advocate on their behalf to the judge, because present company excluded, a lot of judges in the state of Texas have some pretty severe biases, right? All of us do, right? We associate good virtues with wealth and success, right? You must be smart and hardworking. And if you're in an eviction court, you must be lazy and stupid. And those biases are not, the judges aren't immune to them. And so we see very different outcomes if you have unrepresented tenants versus represented tenants. And what we are trying to stop are unlawful evictions. In 2021, I hired 2 lawyers just for fun. We represented 853 tenants in eviction trials that year. We won 96% of them, because that's how often the landlords did not follow the rules, right? The law applies to the tenant. You must pay the rent or you will get evicted. It also applies to the landlord. You must give the notices properly and follow the process that our very conservative legislature passed, right? We're not talking about super liberal, crazy ideas here. We don't even follow those rules. Our goal is to make sure that from now on we do, that there is accountability in these courts and that justice is returned to a justice of the peace court, because historically that is where justice has gone to die, not to happen.
And I think a couple things from our perspective too, which is, and this is really more from the human experience, right? So our psychology says that we are resilient, we can figure things out. And one of the things that does happen is if you don't really know your rights and you don't know when somebody's taking advantage and you don't really know how something's gonna work, we would like to think, oh, I'll go out and I'll learn all that. We don't do that. We hide, we try to find a way around it, and that eats up all the time. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing that I would say about what people don't understand about evictions and what they need to understand is that this is a process, it's a legal process, it's a contractual agreement that you've made with your landlord. This is not a shame-based issue. This is not that you don't know something, but you also then do have to be in charge of your life to go figure those things out and invite people into your world that may make you feel like they're gonna think that I'm a bad person. But if you eat up all that time because you're worried about that, you miss the opportunity of having the people who will back you up. And so I just always want to remind people, because I don't know about you, but I'm the same way. I don't like to go to the dentist when I know that I have not flossed my teeth every night for whatever, because somebody's going to notice that I didn't do something. So what? You didn't do something. You lost your job. Something changed in your world. You can't afford this anymore. You were in a bad relationship. You got out of it. I don't know. I don't really care. I want to make sure, though, that you understand that that does not affect your rights or the remedies that you are availed. It also doesn't mean that you get to step away from the contractual agreements you made with that landlord. So everybody's perspective is looked at in that way, but you do have to be in charge at that point. I'd love for people to just give an example of how an early intervention, something that happened, changed the course of somebody's life in a way that was very meaningful and impactful from your perspective.
I have so many stories. Oh, goodness.
You could do an hour.
I could do a week. You know, I'll share this. I think that the tenants that we see who are most impacted are typically single parents. I'll say more often than not single mothers, but we have seen single fathers. And we've also seen a lot of tenants who are elderly, whether they're living by themselves or they have a child or, you know, a family member who's a caregiver. And those, to me, for whatever reason, that kind of family fabric that I just mentioned are sometimes like the busiest. Life is just overwhelming. They're really the hardest to get to in terms of you have rights. Let's slow down for a minute so that we can get you into the right lane, the correct lane, to make good life choices. But We get a slew of phone calls from people who have not yet been sued for eviction, who are at a notice to vacate stage, or are just falling behind on their rent, or some other reason. There are other evictions that are not related to rent payment. And so our goal at Lone Star Legal Aid is to provide advice and counsel as early on as we can to as many of those tenants as possible. The stories are heartbreaking. The stories are absolutely heartbreaking, especially in my opinion with school-age children who lose their home, who have no place to do homework, who have no place to keep up with their hygiene, place to sleep. And those are really, really heartbreaking stories for the moms or the dad, the single parent who is literally struggling to feed them, much less try to find a new place to live.
I would say my example is when we had someone that used both services. So they had legal aid as well as the rental assistance. The attorney was able to get the court date reset, and we were able to cut a check in the interim. So when both systems come together and work, it works. I would also invite you all to visit your JP courts. They are open dockets. You can go to the eviction docket and just see for yourself what's happening. These are your communities, these are your neighbors, to just understand what the process is for someone that hasn't actually experienced it. I worked in a JP court for 4.5 years before doing this job, so I know what it looks like. I know the kids are there, I know the moms, dads, everyone's stressed out about it, and I just invite you to just do that so that you have the lens and that perspective also.
And if you want to come volunteer at my court, we have lots of volunteer opportunities. This is Nia Birch. She's our resource director. We opened a resource center specifically for people going through evictions and other things that go through our court. And she has a group of interns and volunteers that man that and help people. We don't give them legal advice, but we give them information. And then I'm going to turn it over to Loretta to give the example, because she's the one working on the front lines with people.
Okay. So Judge has volunteered my eviction diversion services to hundreds of landlords at a landlord seminar in November of last year. And since then, I've had about thousands and thousands of calls every day, and that's what our volunteers do. They can go through the calls. And so, of course, the main thing is always rental assistance. That's what we need. And I'm actually right now looking for that billionaire who's going to give us special privately funded rental assistance, which we need. But so far, Harris County has been fabulous. There are, however, qualifications, and they're difficult to understand, and my friend Bailey knows this. And it's pages of stuff. And, I have a PhD, but mine is in music, and it's hard for me to read all that stuff. So I ended up making what's called a cheat sheet. And it's like half a page, and it explains main requirements for qualifications for rental assistance. And this cheat sheet has been very popular because I shared it with lots of landlords. And that way I made friends with a lot of landlords. I'm not talking landlords, I'm talking property managers. So am I talking too long? Because the latest example is going on right now, where one of the property managers has an old lady, and I have many, many examples, as you can imagine, of how rental assistance really worked. And also legal aid and everything else. I have a great friend called Twyla who does finding new homes for people, which is free. It's amazing. She's amazing. So right now it's an old lady. She has no computer and she has no phone. But the property manager is a lovely person who is just wants to help this lady. She has my cheat sheet, right? So she's going to now call me, and we're going to do this application together. And then the lady has to send all the documents to me. It's not easy, and she has to turn it into a PDF file. It's not easy. And then I have to interview her, and then after that I have to send it to you guys, and then they have to call them. So the phone has to be open. For example, my phone, you can only call me if you are in my address book. So my phone is set up so that it doesn't answer. So I have to even in my cheat sheet explain this. If you have a phone, you're gonna get a phone call from Harris County Community Services, so you better have that, available and answer your phone. So there's a lot of like really practical advice when you're working on the ground that people need. Also just simple information about court. People are grateful for just that, being simplified and put in human language. So, yeah.
Thanks, Rod.
You mentioned the terrible, sad stories, Dana, and they are terrible. I certainly wasn't used to doing this kind of work when we first started, and I spent almost a year in therapy because I couldn't go a day without sitting in a dark room in my house in tears because of the trauma of dealing with all the things that we were seeing on a day-to-day basis. But when I think about what are the things that we did that were, proactive in helping, I could tell you all kinds of stories, as I know Dana could as well, everyone up here. We could talk about a landlord setting an apartment on fire when we took our credit card down and rented out 4 hotels and rehoused the entire complex. We could talk about a landlord from New Jersey who bought a 400-unit complex, told his property managers to kick out all the black people, find any reason to get rid of them, and replace them with, quote, better tenants. He turned off the gas, turned off the water, turned off the AC, and refused to turn them back on because they were, quote, broken. Amazingly, after just a few hours of intervention, all 3 came on at the exact same time. The power of the threat becomes more powerful when you execute. And so one of the benefits of the lawyers, and this is not unique to us, Legal Aid's been doing this for longer than I've been alive. Pretty much all the case law that we have in appellate courts that interprets all these laws is because Legal Aid argued those cases and took them up. The stories are endless, and they're terrible. I think the most impactful thing that we did was not in a courtroom, though. It was in the State House. Just this last year, they tried to pass a bill that they've named the squatter bill, because we got to get rid of all these squatters. This is such a huge problem. The whole thing was a lie. It was never about squatters. The bill actually didn't address squatters, not even a little bit, not once. But that was the thing. They got the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House to make it a priority bill, and this thing was going to sail through. Not only did it deny all tenants in the state of Texas all their due process, it was going to allow for evictions without trials even, and it was going to defund legal aid for evictions. So an absolute terrible bill. We were able to spend 3 months down there, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on if you value the years that are left on my life. And we were able to work across the aisle and talk to Democrats and Republicans and get enough people to just recognize that due process still matters in this country, that should be a bipartisan issue. And we got enough Republicans in that committee to hold that thing up for 9 weeks so that it didn't get out of the House. And we were effectively able to kill that bill, except then it came back around through the Senate. But guess what? It had to go through the same House committee. And you know what happened? It got hung up again. So while the law did change, and it is not to the benefit of tenants, except for one thing, it is significantly more watered down than the original version of that bill was, and it could have been absolutely terrible. But there were a lot of people across the state that were advocates and lawyers that went down there, made these arguments over and over and over again every single day. And, that didn't just save one single mom and her kids, that saved millions of tenants across the state of Texas. And that's one of the things I think I'm most proud of.
I think it's one of the things that is important to recognize, that each of these systems has a way to affect policy and legislation, and paying attention to the erosion of different avenues that normally could be supportive, because we should be fair and just and have the process, and everybody has a fair chance to go through that. And so I'm going to lead with this next question, which is, what do you see really for you all from your system, what you could be doing that would help mitigate or prevent more evictions?
Thank you for asking me that question. On behalf of Lone Star Legal Aid, I will tell you that our funding comes in part from Harris County, but despite a lot of news of late, we are also funded by the federal government and by the state, the Texas Access to Justice Foundation. And I think I'm comfortable saying that 100% of our funders restrict us from lobbying. So we're really happy there are people like Mark out there who can toe that line. We cannot. But I think that if anybody will go to a Google News search and look up Lone Star Legal Aid, you will find that we have been tireless in bringing our clients and their plight to the news. And not just in eviction, but all housing matters, whether it's fair housing issues, just every sort of case. We handle so many other cases that are not housing related, but specifically regarding eviction, I think that the feedback we received from Legal Services Corporation, our federal funder, is that they had never seen as much media attention to eviction as they did during COVID when we rolled out what we were calling our eviction right to counsel. We were literally in local, state, federal, newsprint, radio, television. You know, we felt like we were in the spotlight for our clients, but more importantly, we really felt like we were giving voice to some of the extreme problems that our clients were facing. And so that's what we do. You know, we continue to handle the cases, the caseload we can, and then where we have a very impactful story and certainly a systemic issue that keeps coming up over and over again, we try to get our clients permission to put them front and center before the media.
Sorry, I'll go ahead.
No, you're fine. I would say for us, more education. We want to do more know your rights classes. It's just finding the time and the best place to do it. You know, you hold one, it's like 5 people show up, then people don't see like the investment, you know, and the time in it. But I want to do bigger venues and, you know, pack it out to where people can understand what their rights are. So that's a plan. And then also really looking at the data to understand where the infusion should happen so that we can make a bigger impact in the future.
I just wanted to highlight one thing we've had a lot of success with is a program with Houston volunteer lawyers. We started with a friend of mine who's semi-retired, Fred Krasny. You may know Fred. And Fred was volunteering in my court once a week during evictions, and whenever I sort of sensed there was a deal to be had here, instead of me trying to do it from the bench, which is a little awkward, I'd say, y'all go talk to Fred. If you can't work it out, I'll be here. And 9 times out of 10, he'd get a deal. It might not always work out. There'd have to be a compliance hearing later, but usually it did. And whether the agreement be an agreed move-out date, or waiting out rent relief, or they might have other sources where the money was going to come through. We've had great success with that. Houston volunteer lawyers picked up the program, and they're now operating out of at least 3 or 4 courts besides ours. And we get big firm lawyers that come in there, and they really help the tenant and the landlord come to a deal that's a win-win. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've found is tenants don't realize they have a little bit of leverage, and they don't know how to play that leverage. And a good lawyer, a volunteer lawyer, can help them come to an agreement that's a win-win for everybody.
You know, I keep things pretty simple. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. These are all great ideas. We should be doing all these things, right? It's not one or the other. It's all of them. From my perspective, though, I view my role as just to do one thing, and that's to walk into court and kick everyone's ass, okay? And that's it. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to beat you if you have done it wrong, and that's it. And what I have found is people will negotiate with you much more frequently and effectively for your client if they know that you are not bluffing, that you will execute the threat. You will walk in there and say, fine, if you want to fight, let's fight. And so that's what we do. We're here to fight. It's easy. You hire lawyers, you send them, walk through that door, go into that courtroom, get every tenant in the room, represent them, and fight for them. There's nothing more, nothing less. It's that simple. So all we need is more money for more lawyers so that we're in all the courts down here just like we are in Dallas, and I think we'll have the same outcomes that we're getting up north. So I'm a simpleton in this regard. I'm not overthinking this at all. Just point me in a direction. I'll fight anybody.
Well, I think one of the interesting things about just listening to you all talk, one is that coordination of services, understanding what you can and cannot do, moving quickly enough on it, and then having somebody in your corner who's really in your corner, and knowing what that is. And then these systems, understanding that these issues are much more complex, and we have complicated them from the perspective of somebody who might be going through this. And I think it's one of those things, too, where you don't know what you don't know until you need to know it, and then it's too late. And so some of it is like, how do you give this information far enough in advance? It's almost like telling somebody in advance, this will never, ever happen to you, I promise. But if it does, you need to know these 4 things, and you need to know to do them right away. And I think when we get past the idea that we as providers or people who provide the information are protecting people from feeling like something bad is going to happen, that we should just be honest that bad things can happen. And if they're gonna happen, here's your response, and here's what you need to know, and here's how people can help and support you, versus pretending like none of these things can happen, because any one of us at any point in time, I know we like to say it will never happen to us, but every single person I've ever worked with in my entire life in the work I do thought that it would never happen to them. And I just think it's always a really good reminder that it is very easy to decide other people have this happen to them, when we would be better off that this is shared knowledge that we all know, so that we also could help somebody before the tragedy of all of a sudden being on the street with nothing is now your reality. Because getting out of that is way harder, costs way more money, takes way more time than if we could have figured out how to prevent some of that. I think that's why our interest in prevention is so much more focused, because that's not what we do. We've spent most of our time in Houston, particularly the homeless response system, about addressing homelessness, which is great. That's our lane. But one of the things I think is important in what you all are demonstrating is, if you can prevent one, what difference does that make, not just to that person, but the entire framing of what happens in that person's life? And so what I find interesting about this conversation, though, is that somehow we're still not getting to everybody the information they need. And I feel like we're always in that position where around educating. So I'd be interested in knowing, do you have an idea of like how, now that you've been through it enough, you've kind of seen how to go, what are the specific things you would want them to know? And how do you think you could give your druthers, given your druthers, how would you want people to actually know this in advance?
I think that is a challenge that regrettably, I'm not sure that we will overcome it, but the goal is to get the word out, to have programs like this, have outreaches that the county wants to engage in.
Should it be at the time of signing a lease? Should it be in people's apartments? How do you let people?
So, I don't often take the landlord's perspective, although I have represented some landlords. The landlord, I think, would say the tenant is aware at the time of signing the lease. There is a document. I think part of the issue is that the documents people are signing are pretty complicated. I mean, most people, I think, don't read what they sign. I think that's a given in this day and age. So whatever steps we can help people kind of pick up at the time when they become unemployed, or when they fall into, some awful health disaster. Hospitals could be providing information, the unemployment line could be providing information about eviction. There are certain places where we do hear quite often the same story. I lost a job. It used to be, I'm old enough to remember, there used to be people who would come to me when I was still in private practice to say, my spouse was deployed to some war. So we knew, if people were getting deployed, income was going to, there's certain things that you can anticipate will impact the income and may cause an eviction. I'm a huge believer in the media. So I think the more we can get those cases, on the evening news or, on the radio, people will hear it and they'll know that there are rights, and that they'll know that they can turn to legal aid at a minimum to get advice. And earlier rather than later is always best, sure.
We just established, maybe in the last 60 days, a partnership with MD Anderson, because that is a huge place where once you're there, the treatment you really can't work the way you used to. So that has been very lucrative for referrals, but also the impact in those patients' lives is very significant, especially, you're going through treatment, and that's not something that you really think about until after you realize, wait, my check is going to be short. So definitely more there. I feel like the way we do voter education, we need to do this just on a constant basis, and not just one time a year, just constant education, the same way we do, voters' rights. So.
I want to push back a little on what Mark said. I appreciate what he's doing in his job, but preventing an eviction or doing eviction diversion, it's not a black or white thing. If you provide the time and space and dignity for a person to move out in an orderly manner, and you facilitate an agreement that does that, that goes a long way to mitigating the damage of eviction. You can't just look at did the person get evicted or not. You got to look at the big picture.
This might shock you guys. I'm going to say something controversial. Community outreach doesn't work, and it's not worth the money. And the reason is you can only hit, as you mentioned, right? You get 5 people in the room, right? It's tough to address at scale a problem when you're talking to 5 people, unless those people are multi-million fan influencers on social media. In Harris County, there is going to be between 90 and 100,000 evictions filed this year. That's how many. So how many meetings, even if you had 100 or 200 or 300 people, are you going to reach all those people? And by the way, people don't care about eviction education until they're being evicted. So how do you target that? It's not practical. What is practical is every single one of those evictions has to go through one of 16 places in this county, and they are called Justice of the Peace Courts. There is not a 17th court. It's only 16 places. Those are the choke points of justice. And if you're there every day, you hit every single one of them, at least the ones that take the time to show up. And the education is show up. Tell people to show up. But that's a really tough problem to solve. So it depends on what you're trying to address. Are we trying to triage a problem where we're going to help a few people here and there, and that's good? Or do we want to solve a systemic problem? You solve the systemic problem by changing the systems. And we've got to think about it more like that. So it's just 16 places. Go there. That's where your interventions happen.
Loretta wants to make one.
People disagree already, I can tell. But I'm right, and that's okay.
I would never disagree with you. I love you. But as far as reaching out, this is part of my job, and I am still sponsored by National Center for State Courts, who are huge advocates in the evictions, and they're lovely. Today I just heard, this is digression, today I just heard that Utah, we had a meeting with other eviction diversion people all over the country. Utah has like 3-day, like you have to just move out in 3 days. It's insane. Like, so just a reminder, don't move to Utah. But like as far as reaching out tenants, it's very important because we are reducing the what's it called, we're making sure that people show up. So our judge has made kind of an addition to the filing form where tenant information is kind of there as well as landlords. So landlords file, right? But the tenant's information is not really requested there. So we have just put that little thing in there, or judge has done it, not me. Now we have more tenants giving, more landlords actually giving tenants information, and that's who I actually reach. I reach to tenants and I said, please show up. And some of them call me back and say, who are you? And I say, well, you know, I'm then making sure that you show up because you have a chance to win if you show up. You're only going to lose if you don't show up. It's kind of like ticket court. I always go to ticket court, you know. So if the cop doesn't show up, you win. So that's what I tell them. And we have much bigger success in people showing up to court.
We were wondering why you're always at ticket court.
How fast are you driving, Loretta?
That's right. I like it. I'm okay with it. I've been to ticket court plenty of times. One thing I think is really interesting about all of this is that I think multiple approaches and levels of engagement. I do think when you do a shortcut to like where the juggernaut is, it's a little bit of like what we're talking about with prevention too. Like where is the moment of impact most going to make the biggest difference? I will say a lot of times I feel like what happens in housing programs and social service programs and whatnot is that there's a lackadaisical quality to talking about the importance and urgency of what somebody needs to do, including you need to go, like that exactly there. And I would love to see agencies that provide these services recognize that you're not helping that person by making them feel okay about what's happening. Yes, we want to be sensitive to feelings and how they're going, but when you're not objectively saying, if you don't do these things, this will happen, that does not help that person be able to make better decisions. And I do think that's something that becomes very important around information. You know, clarity is not being mean, it's clarity. It helps me make a good decision. And I do think that that's something that in general, even as family and friends, sometimes we struggle with. Like, you have not been working for 2 months. You don't have any resources. I mean, I've had people tell me a lot, you are not nice, but you are kind. And that's the difference right there. That person needs a very clear understanding that there's only gonna be 1 or 2 ways out of this. And when you get there, there are people who are gonna help you, but you also have to have and be prepared for that. And that stark reality is painful, but it's much easier than having something not go because by the time you showed up, you didn't and weren't prepared. I want to just go through too a little bit of just illuminating, because you all are with people who are going through this, what are some of the fallacies about the people who are getting evicted? Like, what are some of the things that we misunderstand about people or have just kind of become tropes or ways that people talk about it that just are fundamentally not true?
They're all deadbeats. And let me tell you, they are not. They are not. People fall on hard times, and it's not until you have fallen on hard times, or your mother, or your sister, or your child has fallen on hard times. I remember very well being in front of a federal judge on a consumer case. The judge was heartless until his own child was being threatened by a debt collector. And suddenly the judge, how's this happening to my child, you know? Forget whether the kid had debt or not. I think that the overarching theme is that we have a lot of deadbeats in our society, and I can tell you from our client base and the thousands of cases that I've seen, whether I was managing the unit or now kind of on the sidelines doing my different litigation, I do see people who have kind of stuck their head in the sand and can't figure out how to get out of poverty or how they got into this place and what small or measured step they can take to better their lives. But the vast majority of people who are in debt and fall behind on their rent and have other financial issues are not deadbeats. They're not taking their income tax return, which everybody in my office is talking about, oh, the income tax returns are coming around and what's that going to do for landlords? They're not taking that money to go buy a large screen television. They're not. Okay, so I think that that's the overarching stigma that we're working against. There's one other stigma I think that we see in our office, and I want to also point out my colleague, Benjamin Daly, Benjamin Wave, I call him one of our top producers. He's one of the lawyers who's been in the trenches now for 5, 6, 7 years, nonstop, tirelessly. He doesn't take time off, although we keep telling him to take time off. So one of the other stigmas that we see has nothing to do with our tenants, has to do with the other side, the landlords, that they're all greedy. And I want to tell you that we've seen a lot of compassionate landlords. The other persona is the judge, that the judges are always going to mete out justice. And I'm making no comment about Judge Dubel, but we have seen some judges who don't follow the law. We're not sure if they understand the law or that they care about the law. And so they become somebody that we fight against. So there's several different personas. We, of course, always see ourselves as angels, but that wasn't the question, so moving on.
I think the biggest one is that they're living above their means. A lot of time people cannot afford to move. So you moved into that apartment 4 years ago, the rent has increased every year, and you just cannot afford to move because the places comparable are more expensive. So that's the biggest one that we see. Recently we had a school nurse that worked at HISD in eviction court. So it's happening to everybody.
Yeah, and I think all income levels. I see some pretty high rents with evictions. It's sort of shocking, but it can happen to anybody.
Well, they kind of said most of it. You stole all my thunder. But I think it is interesting to note that the people that are getting evicted, 82% of them are under 200% of the federal poverty line. And by the way, over the last 18 months, that number is creeping up. So you're starting to see people that are in slightly higher income ranges starting to find themselves in eviction courts. Because it is true that inflation is going in one direction and wages are not going quite as fast. And so you have people that we work with that are working not just one job, but multiple jobs a lot of the time. And they're struggling just to keep up, and they just can't. The deck is stacked against them, and there's nothing they can do. And so if you want to talk about how do you solve this whole problem, that's a big problem to solve. But to your earlier point on funding homelessness versus prevention, since that's what this is supposed to be about, I'll just make one or two comments real quick. The prevention is where it's at, man, as they used to say in the 60s. You know, it's costs $40,000 a year for each person on the streets, right? That's what we spend as taxpayers on the services they use, law enforcement interactions, the county hospitals. It's extremely expensive for us, for someone to be homeless. It costs a few $100s usually to stop someone from ever becoming homeless. Most of these evictions are happening because of a flat tire. The biggest one that we see is a single mom and her kids, and the kid got sick, and mom works an hourly job, and she just missed 2 days of wages, and now she can't catch up. It's a couple $100. Those small interventions stop the pipeline, and then you never get to the $40,000 a year problem. For whatever reason, the homelessness apparatus in this country has focused on the most drastic pieces of the problem, the most expensive parts, to the exclusion of the prevention side. And unfortunately, in an economy like this with inflation going rampant, what we're seeing is we're doing a lot of really good work. We're getting a lot of people off the street. The Housing Forward programs or Housing First programs are working. Unfortunately, we're filling up those streets faster than we're emptying them. So it looks like they're not working to certain segments of society that are uninformed. But if we would take some of that money and we would spend more of it on prevention, we would start to actually see progress. But convincing people that prevention is where it's at and that you can do it at scale has been a tough sell. It costs us $272 a person to go represent someone in an eviction court. We represented 7,512 people last year in Dallas County, right, in full eviction trials. So you can do these things at scale cheaply. Really cheaply. You know, I would say for 72 and a half homeless people, you can fund our entire program. That's the cost of comparison. So anyway, I'll let you sit with that.
Yeah, and I think what becomes really interesting about that argument as well is that it sits in that place where, well, why would I want to give somebody a handout of, you know, they should fix this on their own, they pull themselves up with their bootstraps, all this stuff. The truth of the matter is most people have tried to do that. They went and borrowed boots from their mother, and they went and did this, they did whatever. Houston itself is an extremely rich city. We have a lot of poor communities. 40% of the individuals live, you know, right on the edge of that $400 car issue. Some of our neighborhoods, the rent went up by 23% in 1 year. And so all the people living in that neighborhood had to take that hit. I don't know anybody who got a 23% raise in their last life. I'll go that far. So I think it becomes really interesting when we talk about it from a resourcing place, because if we decided to fully resource, if we knew how many people are here and about to fall in, and how many people here have just been on the street for this long, and how many people here are here, and this is how much money it would take. Because eventually what you would end up doing is it would cost less and less and less and less, because you would stop having to wait till everybody falls into here to be able to access these dollars to solve this problem. And so it's a put forward, forefront, what's the word I'm looking for? Front load. I knew I could get it. Front load the system, because it will work itself out. But we never want to make that decision, because we want to sit, I think, we want to sit in a place where, well, people need to work out their own problems. Okay, they tried. and they're not going to. So now, do we want the problems to get worse? That's a better solution than saying, I'll make my donation of $272 so that you can make sure that they don't. It's a choice we get to make in our society, I think, about how we decide on where we value, and if we value communities and families and everybody and children and all the things we say, we would show up differently, I think, to ensure some of those things. Okay, so I'm going to go with one last question. I think we're on the time, right? I love how everybody on my team looked at my watch because they know me too well. So we've kind of talked about this, but I want to make sure we end, because with you being new to our area, I just wanted you to get a little bit of a chance to explain why you decided on Houston and what you're going to do. But first, I'm going to give everybody a quick question. I'm going to end with you on that one, because I like to confuse people. That's a great way to moderate a panel. So what policy or systems change would you want to see that would change evictions? And these could be little things, big things, but what out of your own trending, what you've noticed and what you've experienced, you're like, if we just changed this would make a difference?
I think from my experience, if we had coffers for rental assistance, that would be very impactful. And I'll leave it at that, because we're really not supposed to be lobbying, but in my experience, a dollar of rental assistance goes very far. Next, after that would be, making sure that every tenant has a lawyer.
So I have two that I want. I want to expand the timeline for evictions. I think it should take longer than 30 days to be evicted, and I think also the hearing should last longer than 90 seconds. So I want that entire timeline to be expanded. I want a judge to sit and listen to me talk about why I'm losing my housing, and then, I want more time in front of the judge, and then also the timeline for that. And then also, yes, I want a state-funded rental assistance program. So where, when we pay to go renew our driver's license, I want a percentage of that to come back to the state to pay for rental assistance throughout the state.
As a judge, I can't really comment too much on the policy part, other than I think a good policy is to connect people with resources, and I think JPs are uniquely situated to do that.
I report to no one, and I can say whatever the hell I want. What did you want me to talk about?
Policy that would effectively
you want some
change
policy?
Eviction from the norm to something that rarely happens.
Sure. Well, the answer is rent assistance, right? This is basic economics 101, right? We got a supply and demand problem. You need more supply, and everyone thinks of the housing market as one big monolith. It's not, right? You've got low-income housing as one market. People that can afford $1,000 a month do not care what the supply of $3,000 a month apartments is. We're building plenty of $3,000 a month apartments in Dallas and Houston. They're everywhere. It doesn't help the poor people at all. In Dallas, we saw rents at the low end of the market jump as high as 43%. The average was 22. The low end of the market was double that. So the poorest people are paying more money in rent, and we can do this two ways. We can subsidize the building of low-income housing in a way that we don't do right now, because tax credits don't work at scale, or we can subsidize rent on the demand side. Those are your two options. That's how you fix it. That's how you keep people out of eviction courts, and you keep them secure in their housing. Subsidize the rent so it goes lower, or subsidize the cost of building that thing so the cost is lower and we have more of it. Those are your options. There isn't a third one. Do one of those two things and you solve the problem.
All right. One thing I do want to mention is we do not have a state-run rental assistance program, and the state of Texas is something that, would be an area that we really need to explore about how the state can really help support those individuals that fall into that category, because we really don't have the money that we pay for in terms of rent or housing dollars is our federal dollars that come in. We have very little local dollars that do that, and we have very little state dollars that do that.
Well, we have more than we think. The Perryman Group, which is a group of economists in Austin, studied our group. They said for every 5,000 people we represent, we save state and local taxpayers $40.6 million. Okay, if we just took 30 of those $40 million, we could give all 5,000 of those people a $500 a month rent stipend.
It's just math. I know people think we're do-gooders, but no, it's a math problem, and it's a decision to make about how we support people and move them on, knowing that for the majority of the people we're talking about, they're already trying to do all that anyway. And so it's an interesting way when you redo the math in a way that gives you an explanation that demonstrates what is your value and how would you assign dollars to that. I did want to give you a chance, since you're brand new to our lovely community in Houston, and we're very grateful that you came down and that you're opening and are a part of our community down here, but we want to give you a little bit of a chance to talk a little bit more about why you decided to come to Houston and what's that looking like for you.
I was forced. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. We're happy to be in Houston, and we're excited about the project that we're working on here. I have a tendency to maybe overspeak my mind a little bit, as you may have seen, and it pisses some people off, and I'm kind of okay with it. But it's just part of the process. When we were in Dallas, we did this by accident. Like I mentioned earlier, this was never an intent. I got plenty of things to do in my day job. I was already busy enough. My wife and I work at this kind of full-time on the side of our other full-time things. We don't take a dime out of the organization, so we make no money. The cash goes one direction and is out of our pockets and into this nonprofit, along with thousands of hours a year worth of time that, quite frankly, I would love to get back. It sounds so relaxing to not care about anyone around you and just enjoy your privilege and live your life. I'm unable to do that, unfortunately. So here we are in Houston. I, again, wasn't looking to expand. It's a lot of time. We got to travel down here and spend a bunch of money and do all these things. But we do this because we have been there, right? I've been that guy that had to take his kids out of a house, before I had anything, before I went to college, before I had whatever privileges that I have now, that I kind of lucked into through a bunch of chance meetings with great mentors and people that re-guided me on a different path. So when I look in the faces of the people that we help, like, I relate to that moment, that feeling of complete desperation. Because for the most part, they have done everything. They have given it their best shot, and they have failed. Try being a single mom with 2 or 3 kids and tell me how you should just fix that by redoing your budget. Those are hard problems to solve, and people need help. We cannot expect them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I think we always crib Martin Luther King because he has so many great quotes, right? But he said it's a cruel jest to insist that a man pull himself up by his own bootstrings when he has no boots. And that is the reality for so many of our neighbors in Dallas and here in Houston. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to work with the county and with Legal Aid, which we've worked with in different capacities all across the state for 6 years now, and Judge Dubel and everyone else. And so we're excited to be part of this community, and we hope to help you guys do great things here. So thanks for having us.
So as our welcoming, we've already talked about the fact that we have a lot of great restaurants, and which may make him move here from Dallas.
That's never happening.
As our closing before we open up for questions, name a good restaurant that he should try the next time he's down.
One of my favorites is Khyber Pass. Khyber Pass on Richmond, just east of Kirby. They have the best sag paneer, and they do a lunch buffet. And the kitchen, you see the kitchen right there.
Lauren's writing this down right here.
Mickey Kapoor's the owner, and tell him I said hello. It's a great place.
I'm going to go with Killen's. I'm a eat, live, play girl in Pearland, so I like to stay near Pearland, and Killen's is just great. They have everything. The happy hours from 4 to 6. It's great.
I've already had lunch with you at some of my favorite restaurants. But Maximo's, that's one I don't think y'all have tried. Y'all need to try that one.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Well, Lauren's written this all down. We're going to try them all.
Welcome to you. To when you're in Houston, just look us up and we'll make sure you get good places. Yeah. All right, I'm going to open it up to some questions. So feel free. How do you want to, somebody do something with a mic? My lovely Catherine.
A question ends with a question mark.
Yes, not a statement.
So raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone. Let's see.
don't know if I'm supposed to stand. I'm kind of short. Hi, I'm here tonight with my daughter, and my name is Melissa. This is my daughter, Leilani. I saw this on Facebook, and something just told me just need to come over here and, find all the informative information. But we was in a situation around the COVID time. Actually, everything you're saying is like the situation we were in. Had housing through Houston Housing Authority. I was in a house. I was in there 6 years. I didn't want to keep moving. I'm one of the ones that had a lot of children. My daughter was in a car crash 2021, and at that time I needed a house that can help with her disabilities, walk-in shower, the hallways wider, things like that. Long story short, landlords didn't like a lot of things. It got kind of ugly, and I reached out to the Lone Star Legal Aid. They was able to give us enough time. I did go through Fort Bend. The judge was not very nice. It was biased. It's everything that you're saying. It was not good. Then even with the Houston Housing Authority, I have a notebook here with so many pictures, so many emails, so many clinging and begging. I didn't know what to do at that time. My daughter did not talk. My daughter did not walk. She was on many machines. I had to learn how to do her trach. I had to learn how to do a lot of things I didn't know how to do. At that time, I'm a single mom of 9, but at that time there was 4 in my household, with the youngest of being 11. I did not know where to go. I didn't have any money in the bank, and with her being in the hospital and no family or anyone to just help me with the medical insurance and anything, I had to be her nurse. And it was very scary with the landlords being very not nice, very rude. They were doing a lot of things they wasn't supposed to do. They turned off the air of the heat, the house failed inspection. And even with that, I fought 2 years trying to do informal meetings. It didn't fall through. I'm still homeless to this day with my now 16-year-old, and she's okay. She has her own house. But this is why I came to the meeting, to get information of what I can do and to help anyone else in our situation. Thank you. And I thank you so much for everyone.
Yes. And so, first of all, thank you very much for sharing your story directly. I think that is a demonstration of just how complex and complicated it is, and I am just impressed and admire you greatly for being able to speak for yourself and for your child. That's not the easiest thing to do, and I think you illuminated literally for everyone, put a face to that experience. And so I do want to make sure that specific things get addressed, and so after this, well, and you're sitting right next to somebody who probably can help you. He's a superstar, we already know. But I want to make sure that you stay so that we get that piece done. But if there's anything that anybody would like to suggest or offer, please feel free to answer directly.
I want to address, and I'm not going to address your specific case, although I'm with Lone Star Legal Aid, I'm not sure I've ever seen your file. I want to maybe just amplify some of the issues that you raised. I think that, one of the things that's been lacking, and Lone Star Legal Aid now has a unit that handles, is a medical legal practice, the connection between medical rights and legal rights. Another issue that was raised, and I just spoke to somebody here from Commissioner Garcia's court earlier about the systemic problem with housing authority vouchers and units that fail inspection. And this is an issue that we see time and again, where the housing authority says we're not paying for a unit, it failed inspection, and therefore the tenant is deemed that they're behind on their rent, they're sued for non-payment of rent eviction, when the issue is just as much with the housing authority as it is with the landlord. I'm sorry for everything you've gone through, and it sounds like life has dealt you a very difficult hand, and you are very brave. You are super brave, and I applaud you for that. And we will gladly get your information and get more details. I would want this audience to know that this woman is unique in her family fabric, and her problems are systemic. Yes. And it's really unfortunate that some of these issues can't be overcome. One of my favorite things to do in my job is to sue landlords, and we've sued the housing authorities, and we're very proud of our work because defending the eviction is one small facet. Where do you actually get justice for the family if you don't go after the bad guys? And for anybody who doesn't know, you can't counterclaim in an eviction because Texas doesn't allow it. So we pull out all the stops, and we love suing landlords who have done wrong. We took a $67,000 judgment just a few months ago against a landlord who did wrong to one of our clients. That's really meaningful, and that is, you know, to me, that is just the tip of the iceberg. We're happy to talk later, and I'm sorry for everything you've been through.
All right, anybody else want to address anything?
I think a good lawyer smartly stays quiet when another good lawyer has already said it.
Thank you.
I'll find her after.
Yeah. We'll make sure the connections are made. All right, other questions? And we definitely have somebody over here, so we'll make sure we get on this side too.
Oh, yeah, okay. What I was going to say actually speaks to her story. It means a lot because Endeavors was blessed enough to pilot a homelessness prevention program in Austin. And what we learned very quickly is the people that were reaching out, it was the surroundings that mattered. And it wasn't just, let's help you with financial assistance. It took months of supporting the families, connecting them with what they needed, finding out how they got there, and then getting them back to a sense of normalcy. And it started with teaching them basic budgeting, encouraging their participation in group education opportunities. We would learn from the clients how they were getting there, and then we would create an environment where people felt welcome to come and listen to what we had to say so that we could help prevent them from getting back in that position. And in situations like this as well, and when we had landlords that, of course, we couldn't work with, guess what? We put them somewhere with someone we could work with, and we got very strong at figuring out who were the landlords we wanted to work with, who we would not work with, who we would do inspections on that would pass, and then we, very slowly learned it has a lot more to do than rental assistance, and being able to identify that and incorporate that meant the world. And going back to what someone said earlier about the money, $1 million served over 600 people in Austin preventing the homelessness. That same $1 million would probably helped maybe 100 people that were already homeless. So it does work, and it makes major impacts.
And I do want to mention, because the coalition, CFTH, has a landlord engagement department within our system, and there are some incredible landlords out there who will do whatever they can do. And oftentimes, particularly when we lost incentives to have individuals come in, those landlords still just work, really, really hard to make sure that people do well and try to make sure things don't happen. So I do want to recognize that there are people out there who really do go the extra mile and try to figure out how to solve it, because they have their own responsibilities and things they have to do too. When we're talking about choosing to do illegal behavior so that somebody gets eviction, that's a little bit different to me than let's sit down and try to figure out how to manage this because the landlord's really trying to solve the problem and help them. I always want to make that distinction a little bit clearer. Yes, sir. Oh, she's coming. Unless you have a really loud voice.
So what does a tenant do when the landlord says the rent is due and the housing authority has not inspected the apartment or fails the apartment and hasn't submitted the voucher to the landlord?
That's a very good question, and I would like James to answer it, and he's going to regret it. Well, I think two things. One thing, so I did have this happen with a client that I actually had in one of my programs. If they have a case manager or if they have some program that they're actually involved in, they need to call that case manager right away and be like, something's wrong. Like, you need to do that. In most of these cases, though, people don't necessarily have a case manager. And so that is where I would be calling immediately to legal aid and be saying, here's what's happening. Again, one of the things I want people to recognize and information to give out is, it may be a problem, it may not be. They'll let you know. Like, they're going to tell you whether that's a big issue or not, and that's okay. That's their job. And so it's okay to call and be like, these are the things that are happening, and I don't know if they're supposed to be or not. And then they're able to work through those details. But if they're in an actual housing program, their case manager should be on top of that. And if they're not, then somebody needs to have a conversation with them. Because for me, the experience I had was that this is a gentleman who unfortunately had gone off his medication, didn't understand what was happening. Housing authority just follows the rules. They don't care. This is another person that is a tenant. I don't have to think more than that. And so the whole process got started, and it was an intervention outside the courtroom with him by, at that time I was the CEO of an organization, and my CEO just went, because we were like, this is bad and dumb and not acceptable from our standpoint as the organization that was supposed to help. And here's this gentleman just standing in this line. He has no idea what's going to happen. So we went in and made the argument that, like, we screwed up. Like, we need to take that responsibility. So organizations need to do what they say they're going to do. But if it's a tenant that's just by themselves, call legal aid and find out and just explain what's happening. I do think it's probably helpful if you put down, like, on this date this happened, on this date I did this, here's the emails I've gotten. One issue I will say is a lot of times too is that they rely on mail or emails. And so it is easy then to say, well, we sent it and you didn't respond to it. So that kind of tracking also has to be kind of developed. But those would be my suggestions. I'm going to open it to
Just a
everybody
really
else.
quick primer, I mean, like 2-second primer. If you're a landlord receiving a federal subsidy, evictions get slowed down a bit. I'm just trying to simplify this for everyone in the room. At least 30 days must pass before that person is evicted. So there may be a defense in there if somebody is getting a much faster turnaround with a notice to vacate that says you need to be out in 3 days or in 1 day. The other thing that I would tell the tenant is that they probably have a really good defense to the case, regardless of the sort of notice that they received. If they're being if the petition says that they owe the full amount of rent, there may be a defense in there. Again, I would try to get ahead of it before a petition is actually filed. Anytime a petition is filed, that's a negative mark on a tenant screening report. It will haunt you for 7 to 10 years, always. End of story. So try to avoid the petition filing to begin with. Yes, get in touch with the housing authority. That's my 2-second informational session on that.
Also, just for us, I think one of the myths is that rental assistance can't help with people on vouchers, and we do. Our program does help people on vouchers, so whether you're on a voucher or not, you can still receive rental assistance. If you can't meet the partial amount that you are responsible for, we still cover voucher payments. So,
and it's also a systems fix. The system's way more complicated. The requirements on the inspections are way too complicated. They take too long. They don't have all of it is something that's an archaic, old methodology for doing something that really could be much faster, quicker, more efficient. During COVID, they let us do videos of apartments and things, not have somebody actually have to go out and inspect everything. So it's one of those things where from a farther viewpoint is like, why are we making this so complicated for people? It just isn't, it's not necessary. You still can have good risk management of properties and expectations and liability clauses and things you need, but you don't need to make it so cumbersome that all it's going to take is, because they couldn't do their job, that person now is in trouble.
I know he had a question.
What is your annual grant level, and then what is it per recipient?
You mean the assistance?
Yes.
So right now, we're still spending ARPA dollars, so we have ARPA flex dollars that we're spending out of. That will go until 2027. And we have a good amount of money right now. We have a $8 million investment that was approved through Commissioner's Court last year. So we're spending out of that bucket. We also do get CDBG, and we still have CARES Acts that we're also assisting out of also, as well as ESG grants that we get annually from the city. Our annual assistance right now is probably about $5,200 because we pay up to 6 months of rent. We're not just helping for 1 month. So we're paying the months in arrears as well as future rent up to 6 months total.
And then secondly, Judge, did we get the list of the cheat sheets?
Trademarked.
Talk to Loretta. Shotgun. I was just going to add on housing authority issues, we've had occasional luck getting the city council person involved on this.
I just found out my cheat sheet is wrong from talking.
Oh, well, you know, it depends on the grant. Some grants are 3 months, some grants are 6 months. Yes, we have several grants, so yes.
So my cheat sheet is too simple. So 5 months.
Yeah.
And I was going to, don't we have some data too on the fact that people who got rental assistance didn't just get back in the system right away, that it actually worked?
Yes, we do. And also the way we vet our clients. So we don't just, as everyone is not eligible for our rental assistance. You have to be working, you have to have a plan. If you were recently laid off, what is the plan for you to get back to work? Because we don't want to see you again in 3 months. Our program is a one-time assistance. So once you are assisted, you cannot come back through the cycle again for the life of the grant.
If you got an assistance in the last 12 months, you also are not eligible.
Yes. So we're not like a cookie cutter. We literally read and vet every single case that comes in through the doors. And the way to access our services is through 211. 211 is really good about screening. There are amazing partners. They answer calls 24/7. They can identify what zip code you're in, what grant you qualify for, how far behind you are. They help to simplify our process. So they screen you, and then we get an email from them, and we upload and process cases from that.
Is citizenship required?
It is not.
There is another grant assistance
Who's our
that's federal.
moderator?
Catherine.
That we found out from National Center for State Courts.
It's called Hope and Door, and it has a little bit different requirements, but it's really also good, and it's privately funded, which I really like, because apparently Arizona has more billionaires than Texas. And but it's only for families with children. They have to be working, and they have to have lived in a place at least 12 months. So it has a little bit different requirements, but some of my people have used this grant money, so.
And I think that's a good
Hope
myth.
and Door.
Yeah, I think that's a good myth that people have, is that you're getting rental assistance and you're just living off the government dole. You have to be working. And even though you're giving 6 months or whatnot, to really move yourself into a position of being able to manage your life may take more than 1 year. And so being able to stack resources over multiple years and understanding that what you're trying to do is a long-term goal to get people into a whole different stratosphere than where they're starting is going to take time and is going to take multiple interventions to be able to work that through for some individuals. And we should just accept that as being a good thing, not something that demonstrates that somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do. It's just the reality of the system. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure how to ask this question, but are we talking about our undocumented neighbors and friends in this conversation tonight?
Yes.
Yes, we are. We are. We have no eligibility. We help everyone. We don't care where you're from, why you're here. I don't care if you did something wrong. If you did something wrong, the landlord can prove it, then you get evicted. That's not my job, right? My job is to make sure you got a fair shake in that courtroom. I don't care what you did or who you are. We'll represent every single one of you.
I got two back there.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Charles Kim. I'm with Cadence Bank, soon to be Huntington Bank. My question is, what can financial institutions like banks, CTFHs, credit unions, what can we be doing a little bit better to be contributing to the cause?
Give us money.
And I meant to preface that by saying, other than the initial ideas that I have in my head.
I mean, I don't know. I'll give you a really good idea that I have no idea if it makes any sense or not, and everybody will be like, "Oh, Kelly, please don't." But I think, again, when we're talking about these inroads, places where we know where somebody may be struggling, I would imagine that people having to max out credit cards, people are struggling with their mortgage, all those kinds of things, that, you know, is there an educational moment at that time or a way to help somebody that's not a punishing, we got to make more fees off of you because, you know, you're now become a huge risk. When you do that, then you just created a bigger risk of that person not being able to do what they need to do. But, I mean, the philosophy of a bank is not to make people's lives better, but I do think there's ways that the same structure in place that allows for you to be successful can be metered out to help other people be more successful. I think one of the things to look at is like all the fees. I get that that's where a lot of money is made, but at some point you've now made it impossible for that person to get out from underneath it. And I don't think that's what the intention is. I think in most cases, the mitigation is let's all get what we need out of this so we can all move forward and maybe not be whole, but not be, destroyed. So that would be my very novice and probably slightly naive suggestion.
Can I add to that? There was an article in the Houston Chronicle just in the last few days addressing an issue that has been a problem in Texas for probably 20 years now, and it has to do with the prevalence of payday loans. And for everybody here who thinks that you have a financial problem, you max out your credit card, we all may be a little naive because so many people cannot get into a credit card. They have no credit and they have no ability to get a credit card. So what they'll do, they miss a paycheck because the hourly worker had to take the kid to the doctor. They end up getting a payday loan. Usury does not exist in that world because of there's case law that's come out of the courts. And what ends up happening is that individuals take these loans that need to be renewed every week or every 2 weeks, whatever the terms are, and the interest rates are literally in the hundreds or thousands of percentage points. What that means to an average American